Let's start. I am talking to Miriam today. She is the founder of La Luna, which is a community of facilitators who organize amazing transformational retreats around the world in stunning locations. And actually, the reason I wanted to talk to her today and share her story is because I didn't realize the power of the work that you do until I attended one of your retreats last year. And funnily enough, it was a couples retreat. And I will not lie, my partner was very skeptical about attending. I didn't leave him the choice, so he attended anyways. But what's remarkable is that only a few weeks ago, he actually brought it up. And he told me um, how he felt that it really made a difference. It really played an important role in the growth and the learnings that we had as a couple. And it is very true because I look back and I can see that. And I think the reason why it's really powerful is because you really approach it from the perspective of the feminine and the masculine. And I know these terms are overused, but we will talk about what that actually means. And in reality, you can't really ignore this because all of nature is organized in that way, feminine and masculine. And so are we. And what's even more important, you layer in the interpersonal aspect of the relationships. And the way we are and act the way that we are essentially comes from all the relationships that we've ever experienced in our lives, mainly our parents, of course, but then it plays out even more in our relationships with our partners as we grow up. Um, Enough from me. Let's dive into it. Yeah, we'll go into all of those points in the episode in more detail. But first, who is Miriam, and what do you do? How do you describe your job essentially and what you do?
Who is Miriam? Um, hmm, well, I I'm a very curious person. I think that's the nature of me, is just challenging what I believe is true. So I feel like I'm on a path that is constantly looking to actually get to know myself deeper, you know? So I feel this question for me is always, it's the very deep one. And but what I do is I am a facilitator and a coach. That's the titles that I think I would give myself. But what I really, over the years, specialized in is women's work and relationship work. Because on my own path, like I said, I've always been questioning and curious. And um, the first kind of stepping stone that I went through is questioning who I am as a woman, my relationship to myself. And why that actually happened in my 20s is because I lost my period for around 6 to 7 years. So
And that's a huge thing for a woman to lose her period for so many years.
it's a huge thing.
Yeah.
And back then in my early 20s, I was modeling, I was in the fashion industry. So I was extremely disconnected from my body. And actually, I was using my body in order in order to get something, right? So it was kind of this disconnection from my deeper sense of feeling and being, that then kind of mirrored itself in my endocrine system, in my hormones, in my blood, in my sexuality also. And I kind of it was a deep sense of being lost in my purpose and the way that I wanted to contribute to life. And my path actually started, I think I was 22, 23. And hmm, I realized that I needed to actually find my way back into feeling, because that was so shut off. So for me, actually losing my period and being disconnected from my body was an extreme blessing back then. And and so then that path kind of brought me deeper into women's work, and I really realized, like, in my family, how disconnected my mother, my grandmother, my great grandmother were from their feminine line, right? It wasn't celebrated being a woman in my family. It was kind of something that either you needed to man up or you need to pull it together, or it was, I don't want to call it shameful because shameful is a big word, but that needing to prove myself and was a deep conditioning that I had to confront. I remember I think I was 25 or something back then. It was my first big journey, you know. And now I lead journeys and I lead retreats and I lead an embodied process because I really believe in that. But my first one was I was sitting on this mountain in Ramdaspuri. It's called. It's in the US. It's in the desert, and I was there meditating for 10 days for this festival, and it was thousands of people, and we were from 4 a.m. till 10 p.m. at night. We were
How powerful. Wow.
super powerful, and I haven't been around that at all in my life. You know,
Yeah.
my parents weren't spiritual beings. Like, it was something completely new for me, and I remember I arrived completely, like I was describing, shut down, disconnected, feeling small, feeling confused. And I think it was 3 days in, I was just sitting, and it was just the immense feeling of power and gratitude and aliveness and bliss and ecstasy that was just like, whoa, like
Opening up,
opening up,
connecting,
a
feeling.
feeling, coming back to this, like being just again in the joy of life, you know? And that joy of life, like that spark, I will never, ever forget that spark, you know?
Mhm.
Even if it didn't last that state afterwards, I'm continuing doing
Yeah.
work, right? But that spark allowed me to see what is actually possible, and it gave me a lot of faith, and
It was a
um,
turning
it
point.
was a big
It's like it
turning.
opens up a window. You see something that you hadn't seen before,
Totally.
and then it encourages you to pursue a path.
Exactly. It was kind of the kind of
Yeah.
here, and this is, and I was studying psychology back then, and I realized, I'm like, oh, like this is what I've been looking for. Like that embodied way of learning to understand who you are, your patterns, how you relate, your relationship to your own body. Like, I obviously, you know, speaking about things and the cognitive process is important, but if you don't include the somatic, the
Yeah.
body, the emotion, the emotionality, the limbic system into a process where actually things get stuck, right? You don't I don't see the same transformation,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And then I went deep into that transformational path. Like, my friend always says, like, when you ask me who I am, like, she always says, like, Miriam, you're somebody that is out in the wild. Like, if you, like, you're out in the sea and you love it, you know, like as far as you can swim, like you test your edges, you like it rough, you like to explore further than I would ever like to explore. You know, I like to challenge myself in that way. And then you can take people there because you've been there already. You felt safe there. So there is a sense of, I feel, safety in the field of transformation, because when you go into these deep corners of your being, which are the deep sea, you know, it can get really scary at times too, and it can get intense, and you need to feel held and safe in order to experience these kind of releases, you know. So yeah, I'm super blessed that over the years, you know, my own personal path then became actually a path of service.
Yeah.
And today,
And I think that's a good summary, because essentially what you do with these retreats is that you're essentially creating that space, that environment to enable people to go through their journey, their experiences. And you use different practices, different formats, because people will be inspired or touched by different modalities.
totally.
And you're just there in service, enabling that to happen.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
like I'm holding up
Yeah.
a field and I'm providing tools that then allow people to actually get to work on themselves
Yeah.
for themselves.
Yes.
And I think what is beautiful, I think for me, is that I get to grow and weave my own personal experience. Like I was sharing like women's work, right? It was my initiation in my 20s. And that then kind of gave way to the relational field because I realized like, okay, first it's the relationship to myself, but then what comes after, it's the relationship that I have to everyone around me, especially my lover, my partner, my parents, and that is what actually ultimately fulfills my life. And again, there wasn't any spaces that I saw besides therapist couches that would help people to figure out their relationships. And I feel like in our society, it's kind of we think that something needs to be wrong in order to start the work. Like my relationship needs to be failing. We need to have really bad sex. We need to I need like in families, our family needs to fall apart in order for us to actually start reflecting and to go within. But often then it's so much to clean up. There's so much broken glass already that it becomes really hard to repair. So I feel at least part of my mission is to create spaces that we don't need to have so much broken glass there
begin with.
and that to begin with, and that this kind of meeting of each other can become joyful and embodied and pleasurable, and that we actually have that as a as a gym, that we actually go to
Like
every year.
maintenance. Yeah.
Because life gets in the way of our relational intimacy, right? We need spaces where we can come back together.
Yeah.
I think it's so important.
But I think there is a lot to be said around hitting rock bottom in a way. We all have those moments. And it's usually in those moments that you know that, okay, the only way is up. So what am I going to do? How do you go from there?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question. I mean, rock bottom, I had a few times in my life. And I would describe it as a moment where all the carpets that you thought were secure are being pulled away from under you. And it's just this thing of like everything you thought was real is not real anymore. So, and then there is this deep feeling of lostness and confusion. And it's almost like you're trying to grab for security, but nothing feels secure, And it's such an overwhelming feeling that in that moment, it's so humbling. It's so ego shattering because again, everything that you thought you knew, actually you don't.
Yeah.
And it's the moment that there is no other possibility than to ask for help, because there's nothing that it's everything is slipping, and I feel in my life, it was the moment that I really bowed down, first of all, to source. Like I didn't grow up religious. I never really had a relationship to God. And in this moment I really understood that I was like, whoa, like please, like help me, please support me. And it was the moment that I understood that actually not everything is resting on my shoulders and is within my control. So it was a really powerful moment of surrender. I think it's extremely, and the moment of surrender then obviously opens up your being to receiving what is actually there for you. So help. And back then I already, I studied psychology. I just sat on many sofas and I was like, this is actually not my way. I need something else in this moment. And I started asking around, and it was the moment that people started to introduce me to different teachers and technologies and tools. And it was like, out of, for sure, I was like, anything that I can do that will bring me clarity and will bring me closer to who I'm actually am.
And I think this is where your open mind and your curiosity was very helpful as a characteristic.
Of course, yes. Yes, my open mind and my curiosity, for sure. And
because also these things don't work after one session or from the get-go. You need to commit, you need to try. It's like peeling the layers, melting the ice.
Yes, and
slowly.
exactly. And the feeling was like back then, like I was describing, I was very my biggest thing is I was very lost on my purpose. Like, and that for me, purpose meant everything. I wanted to feel that I'm living this life to my fullest of my potential. Like, and with that, I started to understand back then that what was happening is that I was so shut off from my vulnerability and my feelings, and everything kind of was so bottled up under so much anxiety back then. So all of that started to come back in these first, like, I was doing a 1 year teacher training back then in Kundalini yoga, which was, I'm to this point super grateful to my teacher, because it meant waking up every morning at 4 a.m. and like having a lot of structure also. That was extremely important in that moment. And what was happening is, like, I was just crying, all the tears that I didn't cry for all these years of needing to hold it together and push through and be the strong one. And I just started to kind of dissipate, and I started to meet the more fragile and tender parts of my being and allow them to have space in my life. So very, very precious moments. Yeah.
And at which point did you discover breathwork? Because am I correct in saying that breathwork is the main practice through which you take people on?
Yeah. Because actually what breath work does is it connects you to your limbic system, but also to your primal brain, because it allows you to access your unconscious in a way deeper, or you enter a way deeper state that you wouldn't usually enter, right? So when we start to actually bring breath work into these processes, it's like memories start to bubble up, feelings start to open up, and then we can actually address subjects from that real hidden truth that we usually don't want to see or even allow, because sometimes it can be very painful. So yeah, breathwork is for sure one of my main tools that I use. And then the first time that I did breathwork, which we call kind of transformational breath or holotropic breathing, was actually at Burning Man. And it was, I stumbled into a tent. I had no idea what it was. I just laid down, and the beautiful thing is when you do something for the first time, you don't have that much resistance. I had ever a stronger experience. Like, my body was shaking. I was revolting. I was sweating. I was crying. I was totally out. And it was so powerful that in that moment, I was like, I had no idea that I was holding so much pain in my body. And the most powerful thing in that moment was that I didn't needed to put a story onto that pain. It wasn't about like, oh, when I was 5, this happened. Like, it was just a cellular relief.
Yes. There's no analysis of the experience.
Yeah.
Just is.
Yeah, it just is. And I gave it that just is. And it was just like, whoa, okay, thank you so much for not needing to hold all of that anymore. And there was this big essence of surrender in that too. It was, I had this experience the first time. Some people don't have that experience the first time, because obviously you need to be ready and you need to feel safe in order to reach these states. That's why I always say, when we facilitate these spaces, safety is the most biggest point in that, because when you feel really held and when you trust yourself, first of all, and the person that is holding the space, you let go to a level that is enormous, right? So, but when you don't, you hold on and you resist, and it actually doesn't work. But yeah, and then after that experience, I actually went to South America. I went to or Central America. I went to Mexico, and I moved to Mexico, and I actually started to study with teachers there. And then I went to Costa Rica, and I was living in this community, and I did this incredible, powerful breathwork training there that was like 6 weeks long. And the most beautiful thing about that was that actually I started to, these teachers, they were weaving breathwork into many other processes, like I was saying, constellation work, mirroring processes, relational sharings, and everything was kind of connected through breathwork. So I learned a lot there, and I released a lot there,
Yeah.
and the most powerful thing actually in that training was that I had this first really powerful experience, and then in the training for literally 3 weeks, breathing 2 times a day, morning and afternoon, right? Like, I did not feel anything. And what happened was I fell asleep, and I just was like in this state of kind of numbness and unconsciousness. And I'm like, what am I not wanting to see? Right. But so now when I obviously work with people, I know this kind of falling asleep, drifting out, it's like a way of actually avoiding a deeper process that is there for you. Right.
Is it a protection or is it is a protection?
Totally. It's a protection.
You're not ready.
Healing. You're not ready. It's exactly, you're not ready. And then there was the moment, it was like, Miriam, just let yourself be seen. Like, it's okay, let yourself be seen. And then it was just like, all the emotions of actually like having felt not being like truly seen as a child, like came up and were coming up to be actually witnessed and healed and loved. And that's the beautiful thing about breathwork. It's when these strong things or memories or patterns or beliefs come up, we have an opportunity to feel them,
Yeah.
be with them, hold them, be maybe held by the environment also. And then we are actually able to give them the love that we never received, right? It's like, whoa, like, and with that, like that little hole that we were carrying around since God knows 5 years old can actually be filled again.
Yeah.
And yeah, in my experience, like it's changed my life and it changed thousands of people's life that I work with. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Wow. So you were on this beautiful personal growth journey that took you to so many amazing places, but so many insane experiences in your mind and your body. And at which point, and this lasted quite a few years, and at which point did this evolve into a career possibility?
Yeah. I think there was something beautiful to say that I I actually never started this with wanting it to become my career. And I think because I didn't have a goal, I was led by, call it spirit, by actually force that was putting me into all these beautiful places for my own healing. So I was extremely supported on this path. And the moment I started to, because the reason for really having entered this path, like I shared before, was very much about finding my gifts and really connecting to my purpose. I obviously reflected and I was like, what? And it kind of started to come to me because the moment I let go of needing to know it, it kind of started to appear. And I'm like, wow, I want to create spaces for people. I want to be like that mothership that can hold these processes. And I could weave these tools that I've now acquired from like, sitting in schoolrooms and psychology, then over all these embodiment practices. Like I want to create a ship that can hold all these different processes and offer that to people. So it was almost, and then invite other artists and
Yeah.
incredible people that I met along this path to this process too. So it kind of was a loose vision like that. And I didn't necessarily know how it would work out or not work out. But what I did realize is how much joy it would give me the moments that I would see people breaking through and really seeing who they are, getting a sense of that power and that bliss and that joy and that possibility and that freedom that lives inside of them. And just to witness that was such a gift. And I'm like, okay, like anything that I can do to be in service of that,
Yeah.
I want to do. And then I kind of kept offering that, like, please, like, guide me to who I'm meant to be, serving, guide me to what I'm meant to be doing. And I kind of offered that up. So I was, and then I was guided to my ex-partner, who is a dear brother now of mine, a beautiful man. And he had a house in the jungle in Mexico, like in the biosphere in Mexico, in this very special, very powerful place called Siancan, the door to the sky. And And he had a very similar vision than I had of wanting to create these kind of spaces and facilitate these technologies to people. And so I had like a blank canvas to play with.
And I think when you surrender and you start to have this approach to life, there's almost a bit of a playful sense to it. Things kind of open up, surprises pop up, encounters come up, and you're in this flow and you let things happen. And even in the retreats that you organize and the way that you are, I really see this aspect of like experimenting and being playful and yeah, I think there's a lot to be said about doing things from this place, from this energy, rather than I need to turn this into a career. I need to have a business plan. It needs to be da da da, which is probably also for you moving away from everything that you had learned in university and school. And
For me, it meant giving up my attachment to security. And that's massive. And to this point today, it's still massive
of
because
course,
strangely, I'm not a business person, right? Like I need to survive myself, but financially and security wise, it's not the best way either, but I'm just in this place where I want to offer the deepest transformation possible to humans and to myself. And I don't want to do anything that I don't feel is the best way that I can be of service. So for example, I know that online courses and all this is great, but I haven't found a way to create something that I would be like in 100% behind it. I'm an in-person person. Like I believe in the energy that we create, that when we sit in one room. I don't have the same feeling when I maybe work online, right? So where am I going with this?
I think the point in what you're saying is that ultimately you need to know yourself and
Yeah.
you need to know your values, your strengths, what you're
Yeah.
good at, what energizes you, and therefore what's the best way to be of service given that. Because
Yeah.
if you go against
Who you
who
are
you are
and what you believe
and
in.
what you believe in, it's not going to work. Because maybe that works for someone.
When somebody
Exactly.
and
That's what they're supposed
word for
to. Exactly.
but like this like authenticity and like really asking myself step by step, like what is true,
Yeah.
like what is really true?
Yeah.
Is it really still true that I want to do retreats? And maybe one day it's gonna say, actually, no.
No, exactly. And that's okay.
Terrifying because that means that we again surrender everything that we just built
And you evolve again
and
into
evolve
something else.
into something else.
And that never stops.
But it's breaking my German conditioning
Yeah.
of having had parents on a very linear path. And my dad is a doctor, my mom is art, like a Kunsthistoriker, I don't know the English word for it, but both of them are very academic people, right? So it's like I was brought up with thinking that a CV and then the steps of your curriculum vitae, like that is what matters and you cannot lose time. And now I'm really in this place where I'm like, I surrendered all of this and I have no certain sense of using somebody else's structure. I needed to build my own structure. And I need to actually trust that this is what I meant to do. And sometimes there's moments that I doubt. And the most beautiful thing is in these moments that I doubt, I always receive another message. And for anybody listening, like when you are on this really wild path, when you connect, you are so supported when you're of service, and then there is maybe a message that comes through of somebody or maybe a little, thing. And you're like, oh, wow, no, I'm going to keep going. I'm on the right way. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about mentorship. Because I feel we are in a very different time now. And our parents did walk a very different path than we do. And now we actually need mentors that can show us a different way and can just be like, hey, keep going, you're right. Like, just look a bit more over there, like, and can cheer us actually on and give us faith that is so needed to break out of that linear way. So that we can really do what we're meant to be doing in this life.
And this relates to your mission, correct?
Yeah.
So can you tell me exactly what your mission is and what it means to you?
My mission. There's different aspects, obviously. Like my mission, first of all, in regards to women, which I'm really passionate about because I'm born as a woman and that's the identity that I live in this life, is to allow women to feel the most alive, recognizing their power that they have, their gifts, their sexual expression, and really bringing that to the world, because women are the one that birth children and the next generation through this world. So that is for sure part of my mission, is women's work. And then the other part of my mission is, like I was sharing, relational work and offering spaces where, again, we can work in the nucleus of home. I feel home is where we feel, where we should feel safe. Home is where we gain strength from. Home is where we create families. Home is where, so when I work on these relationships, I actually give people the possibility to have that kind of home. And so, yeah, giving tools and people the possibility to love in the very big, fearless way that they would like to love is my mission too.
And what a big and beautiful mission there is. And how amazing that you are actually doing that. You're living by that mission, by those values. And yeah, not a lot of people have the opportunity to do that because not a lot of people take that leap of faith.
Yes, you're right. Yeah.
And part of your mission, well, a big part of your mission is focused around women's work. And when we spoke last time, you mentioned the importance of making space for the feminine. So can we go a little bit into these notions of feminine and masculine energy and what it actually means outside of what we see on social media and the way it's been overused, but essentially what it actually means and how it plays out in our lives.
Okay, so there's these two different forces. It's like Shiva and Shakti.
Exactly. So actually it's a force. It's like the yin and the yang, and
It's a
sun and the moon. It's the plus and the negatives and electric currents. So actually there are so many other ways in which we can explain these two magnetic,
yes,
polarized poles.
And everything, like you're saying, in the world is polarized, right? There is always and that's polarity, right?
Yeah.
There is always the polar opposites.
Yeah.
And
even in plants.
Even in plants.
You have the feminine and the masculine. You have the receiver and the giver.
Yeah. And that's exactly, it's another beautiful way of describing it. It's like the Shakti, the feminine force is just out there and in that fullness of her experience. And she's that receptive force. And when we are in this really surrendered, deep state of receiving it, extremely vulnerable, right? Like we need to really feel like safe within ourselves to allow that kind of penetration of life force to be happening. And that is also, I think, for us women, right, to realize of like when we really want to tap into the fullness of our potential and power and creativity, it's a space where we need to fully lean back and allow that kind of energy to come through, right? And through that kind of spaciousness, we then birth something outwards, right? So it's that kind of connectedness. But when we are in this very kind of, again, masculine-driven, but action-driven world that we live in, I don't want to call it masculine, but action-driven world that we live in, we don't necessarily have that connection and that feeling of who. And so we don't birth things through ourselves. We actually push things from the mind forward, and it gets extremely exhausting.
It's like forcing
things to happen from the mind. So exhausting. And then it actually it's not even original often or extremely satisfying. It's just you're in this grind. And I see hundreds of women, like, again, that I work with, just burnt out and tired. And
like a delivery execution mode rather than creativity.
Delivery, execution, pushing, feeling that, you're just, you're in this machinery, and then it's just nothing feels fulfilling also from that place, because you're not accessing your your potential and you're burning out literally under
Yeah.
all these different roles that you put upon
Yeah.
yourself. Even if it's one day a week where you get to lay outside under a tree and in the grass and even have 10 minutes of just breathing, then you just feel the power in your body, and then creativity starts to whisper, but what I think is really important to know about polarity and these identity roles of masculine and feminine is that when we want to create attraction, we need to understand how attraction works. And attraction works between a plus and a minus. So it doesn't mean that a woman always needs to be in her negative, receptive pole. And it doesn't mean that a man always needs to be in his masculine plus pole. But it means that we understand how energy works. And we understand that if I want to create this kind of feeling of magnetism, I need to understand how I can switch my roles. And if I want to switch into the masculine polarity, I'm going to be holding the space. I'm going to know what it means to breathe and become solid and actually offer my gift of awareness. And I learned to meditate into that space of silence and peace and protectiveness, right? Because it's also a protection that we offer the feminine in that place, and a place of solid clarity of like, whew, like directedness, that comes from that place too. So if I start to build a relationship, me even as a woman, right, with that masculine pole that I have, I can already my spine straighten, right, when I call in that energy, and I can hold myself in a way more clear and secure way. So part of my search for security was actually part of my search for my masculine polarity that I needed to foster. So we start to play with these two dynamics, and I think in relationship especially, it's so a romantic relationship, it's so important that we have an understanding of how energy works.
Yeah. And I think that's really important because ultimately we have both energies, and it's understanding what those forces are and then playing around with one or the other depending on what it is that we're doing or what it is that we're trying to achieve. But without knowing, you just simply can't do that.
Exactly. And that's why, for example, in the retreat, I hold a workshop for men around exploring what it really means to lean into feminine energy, for them to get an embodied feeling of that through a process, right? And all of a sudden they realize like, whoa, like how vulnerable that is and how sensitive that is. And they create a connection and an honor within themselves towards that energy, because only if you know it within you and if you honor it within you, you can honor it within a partner, right? So it's a really powerful, and I had men afterwards, coming to me of like, whoa, like I just realized I just saw my mother in this. And for the first time, I want to bow to her feet, bringing that respect back to that feminine energy and then wanting to protect it, right? And I think in our society, like men that are in awe of the feminine and want to protect that and want to actually create space for that, it's like, wow, like I bow to them,
Yeah.
It's so beautiful.
It's so beautiful to witness it. And when you were talking, I remembered one of the exercises that we did is where essentially two people, and it actually doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman, it doesn't matter because we have both energies within us, so we embody one or the other.
Yeah, I practice with a lot of women.
Exactly. And we were doing this amongst women where one had to hold the space and be very still and not break eye contact. And the other person had to be the feminine. So really move and like just follow her instinct in terms of how she wanted to either dance or sway her body. And then you inverse that. And the way you feel and the way you essentially tap into that is so powerful and so strong. And it's a matter of seconds. And you really feel in that moment that you're, wow, I'm the rock, I'm the mountain right now. And then it's like, I'm the waves, I'm the wind, I'm the water.
And the cool thing about this is that you start to have an idea of what that role, what that kind of identity means. Because I practiced this with many women. I had extreme erotic experiences with women also practicing this. Like the moment where you feel you are the one that hold and you embody that energy of containment.
Yeah.
It's like
The responsibility.
responsibility, and you get to feel like, wow, and you see the woman in front of you or the feminine being in front of you releasing or surrendering more and more the more present you get, and it becomes this kind of interplay. You're like, whoa, it's really empowering.
Yeah.
And then switching that and realizing, how, and also for men or for masculine being to practice that is like, whoa, it's so vulnerable to be in this flow, and I need to be held for that. So realizing the different polarities within our body, or the different roles and identities and archetypes, within our body, really helps us understand each other better.
It creates empathy.
Empathy. And that's the power of long-term desire. And I really see myself, like, I've been working with the archetype. That's why I love archetypal work, like even bringing the kind of sacred, kind of sexually expressed slut archetype, right? That is so like pushed under the wagon. It's like a feminine expression that we are kind of like, we kind of separated, right? Like in our society, we're like, oh, this is dirty, or this is like something that is not allowed. And for me, I subconsciously, I was like slut shaming myself for being sexually expressed. So I was like, really bringing that archetype back in a safe and honorable way of like, wow, my sexual expression is beautiful and important and celebrated, and I can put underwear on and I can play with her, like the kind of Lolita goddess, right? And she's actually the one that then motivates my partner to actually, it sparks something in him. And but only if I can actually consciously understand which archetypes I've been suppressing and where I've been holding shame and inhibitions and all of that, I can start to then bring them back and see how that me embodying a different kind of energy actually then changes dynamics, right? And that's the power of self-work. We obviously, I mean, many of us, right, we're like, oh, my partner and this and that, my partner. And so much of my work is actually, even if I work with couples, is fully taking responsibility for yourself and what you bring. And it mostly has very little to do with the other.
It's crazy that you say that, because actually, well, sometimes you forget, but now I just remembered, coming out of the retreat that I did last year with you, I think that was the biggest learning, is taking responsibility for yourself. Because, I mean, I've always been super responsible and I've always been super independent, but you don't realize that part of our shadows is that we're essentially expecting and projecting the other person to give us that little hole that's inside of us.
Yeah.
And when you realize that actually no one's going to give you that, you're going to give that to yourself, it's so empowering and so liberating.
Yeah, like needs are prison.
Yeah.
And needs is like, oh, I need, and then I need something else, and when I have that, and then I need some. And then we kind of, it never leaves us necessarily satisfied, and it always leaves us looking outwards, right? When I actually feel like, okay, if I can feel that I'm actually complete, I heal all levels of codependency, right? Like, I'm like, okay, like, oh, you want to feel more sexually alive? Like, how are you going to give that to yourself?
What are you going to do in order to achieve that? And that can be applied to anything.
Anything. And usually then, if the dynamic shifts, and because also when somebody always looks at you, how do you fulfill your own needs? Like, I want to see, and then I learned through that, so it's like, when I start to, like, for example, like, I start to one of my needs is structure, like, I realized that, like, one of my needs is structure, and I'm like, how dare I put this onto my partner? Like, now he needs to create all the structure for me, and without, it's like, where is my own masculine Shiva force that is in there and can create that structure for myself? And with that, when I start to embody and do that, I teach my partner what kind of structure I like, right? Like, so I think it's a really empowering game to take care of your needs
And something that I really enjoyed in your retreat was also the dynamic that you had with the rest of the team. So there is so much collaboration. There's so much yin and yang. There's so much, each person bringing their gifts, their services to the group. So can you talk a little bit about that relationship that you have with your team, but also how it plays out in, I
Mm.
guess, the experiences you create? There's a lot of, yeah, the relational aspect is really present in everything that you do.
Mm. I love that. Yeah, I think I think what was important for me is that when I create experiences that I bring a diversity into it that is less dogmatic or less the teacher on the pedestal. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'm not it's like I'm going through this with you together. I can share experiences, and I think when I bring a diversity of teachers into it, it creates a field where it's not like one way or the right way.
Yeah.
It's like I have more experiences in a room, and maybe one thing resonates from that person, one thing resonates from that person, and we actually create, a diversity. I think diversity is so important, and it's so important to let go of this egotistical, it's about me and the woman, the front show woman, like what I see so
Yeah.
much in spirituality, which is for me, it's just it's kind of defeating the purpose,
Yeah. And
you
I'm
know?
so glad you mentioned this because for anyone listening or anyone embarking on a journey or going through a journey, it's really important to never give your power to the teacher or the person leading because no one is ever 100% right. No one is ever 100% wrong. So you need to ultimately take what's good for you
Mm.
and know that you are ultimately responsible for your experience and your journey and never hand over your vulnerability and power to someone else.
Totally. It's like you can fix me. It's
Yeah,
like
no one will fix you.
nobody will fix you. I love teachers that are just very clear, and they're like, okay, so now you got this, and now
Yeah,
you got to get to embody that. And that's your own commitment. I can't commit for you.
yeah,
You got to commit for yourself. And I think that's the difference between people that are really like taking these tools and this path in. It's their commitment to their own
yeah,
freedom. That's really
yeah,
what it is.
ultimately. Yeah,
Yeah. And yeah, I think with La Luna, I think for me, it's a collective. It's a way that I can share this dream with other humans, with especially friends, because like I said in the beginning, I over these 10 years I collected so many beautiful, beautiful friendships, so much community on that path that now I want to share that sense with others. So for me, La Luna is and it's like it's my baby, but it's a sense of a mothership that now, yes, I can go through this path alone, but actually I can create a field with other teachers, with friends, with people that are on the same path, and now we can go through this journey together, because we all know when we're on a sailboat, right, and we sail it alone, and then we have a team of, I don't know, 20 people, and one person pulls that string and the other person holds the sail, it just becomes way more pleasurable and and actually deep when you know you're supported by
yeah.
humans in your life and you share similar visions. And so for me, this community aspect is so extremely important. So yeah.
Thank you so much.
And
I
it's so
think,
cool also
yeah,
to see you. Like I know that, I mean, I didn't ask you any questions about that. Um I know that you went through a really deep transformation
yeah,
process the last years too. So
yeah,
I think it's so beautiful that you're actually sharing this in this way.
yeah. No,
Thank you.
I feel very grateful actually for all that has happened because it is through those experiences that you kind of do the work. And then when you do the work, you learn to do things differently. And ultimately, it's empowering. It's empowering, it's liberating. You realize that you have a role to play in how you feel. You have the biggest role to play in how you feel. And yeah, it's going back to yourself and going back to understanding what you want, how you want to live your life. And
And part of the reason was also for you, like, finding your gift, right? Like,
exactly,
really living
yeah,
your dharma, your service,
yeah,
and wanting to explore what that actually
exactly.
is.
Yeah, and really being open about it. Being trusting is a very difficult exercise to just kind of, let go and trust. But yeah, I think there came a point in my life where I realized that's the only way. Otherwise, you just keep doing what you've always done, and then you'll never know what else could be out there, what other possibilities. And a lot of these practices, and breath work was a really big one for me as well. Last year, particularly, I had discovered it a few years ago, but not with so much depth as I did last year. And exactly like you said, it took me to places that I didn't even know were there. It took me to emotions that I didn't know I was feeling that were trapped, blocked somewhere. And when you basically meet yourself in a way that you didn't know you were living or wounded or experiencing, you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
something's got to change.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah.
a really beautiful
Yeah.
explanation.
Some things need to change. You need to do things differently. And then once you trust and you start to do things differently and approach life from this perspective of surrender and acceptance, of course it's difficult. There's always this like stability, resistance, da, da, da. But ultimately, once you start to like give into that, it becomes playful. It becomes a game. Yeah, and you just enjoy it, and you become more confident in the support system
Yes.
that is around you.
Exactly. And I love what you say, it becomes a game, because
Yeah.
it's almost like when I entered a moment where I know that whatever pain happens to me, or breakup, or change of my life, or grief, or
Yeah.
what will, I know that all of these things will, it's like we get initiated into another depth of
Yeah.
our being. There is so much freedom and actually even pleasure in
Yeah.
it, because it's aliveness itself.
Yeah.
So I think that's also part of this, is why we do this work, is because we will get initiated over and over again
Yeah.
in our
It's
life.
never ending.
Never ending.
And it's almost like, for me, at some point, I started to think about it like, the wheel of emotions, where it describes all the different emotions and the layers. And I remember there were times where I used to think, oh, anger. I've never felt anger. I don't know what anger is, or whatever emotion. And then there are situations, experiences, actually through breath work, I think I really felt anger for the first time. And I came out of it and I was so happy. I was like, I'm so happy. Finally, I know what it feels like to be angry. Like I've released that emotion that I never allowed myself to feel.
It's like good girl. Yeah.
Exactly.
Conditioning.
Exactly. So you break
roaring
free.
it out.
Exactly. And then you realize that unless you've experienced these emotions, and unless you've lived life and gone through the highs and the lows, then you cannot be of service. You cannot be of guidance. You cannot be a good friend to someone if your life has only been this.
Yeah.
How do you relate to what they're going through? How do you have empathy, compassion? And you just essentially become a better person for your community, for your family, for your friends, because you've walked the walk.
Totally.
And it just makes you like a more
Totally. And that's
well-rounded.
and it's like all these little things that we get to bring to our communities, families, or partners. It's like, it's a massive work, And sometimes I feel like we forget to celebrate these little changes, or these little learnings that we actually embody in our lives, and we think it's so much more. I need to study and I need to do, and but actually it's like right here in the most smallest actions that we take.
Yeah.
Ah.
Thank you so much. But yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation.